Hi, welcome back. I'm Dr. Moby the Explorer. For those of you who are new, welcome. I'm like super excited today because I have my big brother with me. He's not only my big brother, but he's the co founder of a faith based social justice organization named Leaders Network of Chicago. He's an original conference speaker on the lecture series of Coming Home. And the mission of that and the goal was to create worship and interaction and dialogue, which I'm big on, between U.S. Africans and U.S. African Americans. He's well traveled. He traveled as a delegate with the Interfaith Partners for Peace. They went to Nazareth, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Tel Aviv, and Palestine. And then in 2016, I was so graced with his presence to go. He came with me to Ghana, and we went to Accra and Kumasi and Takrady and Elmina and Cape Coast together. And so he's well traveled. Those are just two of the places. His mission in life is to serve God. He's been the pastor of New Landmark on the west side of Chicago for 19 years. He's a father of two beautiful daughters who are my nieces, and he's the husband to my big sister. Come with me. It won't be long, I promise. But come join the conversation. I encourage you, leave your comments, your thoughts. I want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. This is a conversation and a dialogue for you. Brother, thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking this time. Before we get into it, let me just define what culture is as it relates to Moby the Explorer. Culture is a set of behaviors, customs, and beliefs that are practiced by a group of people. So when you hear us talk about culture on Moby the Explorer channel, that's what we're referring to. And again, you heard the introduction. I have my brother with me, Pastor Cy Fields, and we're going to get right into our conversation. Welcome, bro.
Thank you, Monty, for inviting me and allowing me to be a part of this great series that you're doing. And you're going to make a difference in helping to enhance the understanding, the education, and the culture of those of us here in America, as well as even those in Africa. So thank you so much.
I pray. So the first question is, what advice would you give African Americans to cultivate relationships with Africans here in the U.S. and abroad so that we can begin to bridge the gaps?
Well, first of all, I really think that it really begins and ends. The best advice I can give is that we just need to have communication. That is the best advice. We need to tell each other stories, right? I believe that there is a huge, gigantic, excuse the expression, ignorance gap between the two cultures. Even though we share pigmentation, we share lightness in skin, uh, we share even bloodlines. We're culturally different. And not only that, but we're culturally different, but we have a shared history. We have a history that's connected one to another. And I think the biggest advice I would give to help cultivate relationships between Africans and African Americans, it all begins with understanding, having dialogue, having a conversation, and learning each other's culture. There's a misnomer to think that because we have similar pigmentation, that we have all things in common, and we don't. Right? We don't. There's a lot that we don't have in common. And so I think that's where it begins. That's my best advice in a very generic sense that we begin to have, because there's a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of, I think, some hurt, historical hurt, let me put it that way, that needs to be talked about, crystallized, and sort of, I won't say analyzed, but really just have a hard conversation, because history has done a number on us. And I think we have to be very authentic and very honest with each other about the roles we play in the separation and the roles we can play in us coming together as uh, as a people.
And you said history, and I don't know if you want to elaborate, but what do you think the historical divide has been?
Well, one, I think it really begins that I think the rift that really starts today, I mean, that really continues today is, the role that Africans or African chiefs played in the slave trade. I think that that's a major part, though that's not part of the whole story. That's the story we get when we sort of dig deep in our history, is that almost as if the African chiefs or our ancestors just willingly gave us over. Now we know that that was part of it, but it's not the whole story. There were many tribal chiefs, many chiefs who also had raids, insurrections, and fought against the slave traders. And that we don't hear about, right? So it's not just this clear sort of beeline, if you will, that they just sold us over, right? And so there were many many resistance efforts. And so, that piece there, I think, but the fact that that's a thought within many African Americans, they didn't fight for us, or they just, how could they let this happen? All this and that is a misnomer. Also, I think that one of the big things that divides us, particularly here in America, and in my experience, and with the Coming Home symposiums that we've had over the years, which was designed to bridge the gap between Africans and African Americans here in the United States, and starting here in our Chicagoland area, was really, as African Americans, we feel that Africans sometimes when they come, not understanding the culture, not understanding fully experience, it's as if, again, they're able to come here and benefit from the struggles and from the victories of African Americans through civil rights and down through the years and all of that, our fight for justice and many things. And they're able to not necessarily identify or be partakers in it. That is a big thing, I think, keeps a divide between the two cultures, is that we don't often see our African brothers and sisters who are here in America on the front line with us. Now, there may be some, but to a large degree, I think many Africans take advantage of their foreign status, right? And being a foreigner allows them to mainstream society to seem as somewhat separate from those of us who were born and raised in the hood, right? And who have grown up in the struggle in America and have faced racism. And many African Americans here feel that our African brothers and sisters haven't felt the racism and maybe are not fully engulfed in terms of what we have gone through. And even sometimes it seems like they look down upon us because of our struggle here in America. So that's a big divide. For us, on the other side, even though I think there's a romanticism that many of us African Americans have with Africa, right? In sort of this awareness or this awakening, right, that happened a few decades ago, right? We started wearing kente, and all these kinds of things, and start identifying. We identified with the fringes of African culture, but we didn't seek to dive deep into the nuances, as you defined it, of the African culture. And so therefore, we did have this romanticism without really digging deep about the history of Africa and even having a desire to go there and learn about the beauty, the strength, and the vibrancy of Africa and our ancestors.
And so you began this conversation, and so when you think about your Ghana experience, what are just 2-3 things that impressed you about Ghanaian culture that you would like to see adopted by African American in the States?
One of the things about the Ghanaian people in being there, for me, I just love their freedom of cultural expression.
Yep.
It was a natural.
It is.
It was a natural, right? Although you can see some influence of some foreign influence, right, from whether it be Europe or some foreign influences from America, or even some influences from the hood, right? Maybe hip hop generation. You saw some of that. It was very clear to me that many of the Ghanaians, those who I interacted with, never always understood their root and their foundation in the Ghanaian and the African culture. For example, Monica, if you recall, when I believe it was our first stop when we got to Ghana at nighttime. We went to an outdoor club or something. I don't know what it was called. It was an outdoor club,
Of
whatever,
music.
right?
Right. Just want to hear music. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, and first of all, I was just, oh my gosh, it was such a great feeling, right? Because I was hearing them sing American songs, singing some Temptation, some Michael Jackson, and and they were doing their thing, right? But what took me to the mountaintop, amen, very early on in that tour, in that Ghana trip, was when they shifted and began to play some indigenous African music. Oh, you talking about then the place went up, right? And they was partying with some of our songs and all of that. But when that traditional African music came on, right, that they identified with in terms of their culture, I mean, everybody on the dance floor. I remember one guy. I mean, he had a half a shirt on. I just remember him holding his hands up, just like we do it at our parties, right? It was like as if he had just struck gold, right? And the happiness. So, and it wasn't just that night, but it was throughout, right? I think the Ghanaian people, and so I think that we can learn from that. Not to say that African Americans are not a proud of who we are, but I think that our roots are different, and that makes a difference. Our roots are different. For us, for me, our roots, of course, are in America. That's where we were born. That's the first culture we learned, because as you know, Monica, many of us had a miseducation about Africa, right? Growing up, in school and what have you. And so I think that what we can take from them is that to really be rooted and be proud of who we are as African Americans, who has ancestral ties to Africa, amen, which is the motherland of all civilization. And so I think that will help us in terms of raising and I don't mean this in any derogatory way, so sort of raising our inner standard, right? Having that pride, that esteem. It's nothing like knowing who you are, whose you are, and who you ain't, to help propel you toward a destiny and a future. And I think the Ghanaian people, when I was in Ghana, I think they had that. And that was very true and very evident. And I think that we as African Americans can grab some of that and really propel us even further than that which we've come even now, even this year, 2020.
That's good. That is good. How did your perspective, if it did, change from uh, prior to your visit to after you visit? Was there any perspective change that you noticed or witnessed? Anything different um, before you went to Ghana?
Well, before I went to Ghana, like many of us, we only know of Africa what we have seen through television. And of course, that's very limited here in America. There's more now today than it was growing up. So my perspective, maybe what I intentionally and personally sought out to learn and to read, and for me, even that was limited. So I must say, prior to going to Ghana, I had a very limited perspective, though I knew it was Mother Africa. Again, I had that romanticized, it's Africa, that's where we, that kind of thing, but really being ignorant of or not having any in-depth knowledge about the culture, the people, the history, et cetera, et cetera. I had no idea, and then maybe I shamefully say this, I had no idea prior to going to Ghana that it would be big city. Not that I thought it was all jungle, but I just didn't imagine. I didn't know that it would have big cities, right? in Africa, right? With skyscrapers, tall buildings, right? That kind of thing. No, seriously, I had no perception. And so upon arrival in Ghana, when the plane touched down, and just seeing the buildings and the eloquence and the culture of it, it was like, wow. And I promise you, upon landing and letting my foot set feet on the motherland, the homeland, something within me said, I'm home. And I'll never forget that experience. It was like, I'm home. Even though it wasn't my residence, it was my ancestral home. And there was a sense of just new pride, this new esteem, this new awareness of myself and who I am. The part that they systematically and intentionally sought to deny and to cross out and leave out the history books, or to not put on TV and only show Tarzan and the jungle and all this stuff. It was like opening up a new book. It's like opening up a new book, right? To explore and to learn about a part of me and my background, my people, right? That I never knew before. So it's like a kid in, a kid in the candy store. It felt like Christmas. It really did. It was a gift that I had been denied or had not received in all my years up to that time. And arriving to Ghana, it was indeed a gift for my life that I'll cherish forever and I'll never forget.
Yeah, and that's how I feel. And I really wish, I have a lot of African friends, as you know, but I really wish that many of them will come. Like we go and we are excited. And I know America, it's not our home for real, African Americans. However, my hope is that when they come and they migrate here, that they would immerse themselves in African American culture and get to know that we do have a culture. We have our own culture. And I
Yeah.
and I think that also will help with a better understanding between African Americans and Africans. Because when we go wanting to learn about their culture. And I hope
Mm-hmm.
that they will migrate and want to learn more about us so that we can have a better understanding.
Can I add, Monica, if you don't mind, to your point? So you eloquently so stated, it's a mutual sort of the term we've all heard before, this cultural exchange that needs to happen between us. Because even as Africans, in my perspective, and it would take another African to sort of, either agree or disagree with what I'm saying, they too have a limited idea of our culture
Yes.
as African Americans, right? Um, for many of them, just receive only what others want them to know. We gangster, right?
Mhm.
We gangster. Just like we only saw the African kids who was hungry and all that kind of stuff and jungle. They only see us as gangsters, drug dealers, hood people, all this kind of thing. For many of them. And so there's another perspective that they need to learn as well. And that's why, from your first question, it's so important that we have this cultural exchange because, Monica, I think the world knows in a very indirect way, or at least a very silent way, that when Africans and African Americans come together
No.
and really have a sense of unity,
Mhm.
we can change the world. We can change the world because there's an African on every continent, every soul in this world. Especially if we can have an awakening to our brothers and sisters over in Brazil, right? Uh, sort of the other country that had even more indigenous Africans, go over to Brazil in terms of slavery and all of that, and America and all the other places where we have that the African diaspora, if you will, exists throughout the world. If we can ever unify
Mm.
and sort of I'll even say halfway show unity, right?
Yeah.
In purpose, we can change the world. We can change the world, and I think that we're our own worst, hindrance. But also, I believe um, those in dominant society may realize that too, because we all have a shared history that gets under our skin, that sort of we don't agree with, and we know that an injustice, an unrighteous, an evil thing has happened in
Yes.
terms of in our ancestral lines.
Yes.
And so that's why it's important. I think that what you're doing and what you're attempting to do is to help bring a awareness or an enlightenment to many who may not even thought about traveling to Africa or even getting to know more about the motherland.
That's true. And another thing, Sai, is that we African Americans take for granted that Africans know the North Atlantic um, chattel slavery
Slave
stories.
trade, yeah,
They
right.
don't know the story.
That's
It
true.
is shocking how many Ghanaians that I know personally that
Hmm.
had never been to the castles,
Hmm.
had that just not something that they had, so now I think they have field trips for the younger kids and they go, but there are so many Ghanaians that I've run into, Sinhalese. They're a little different. They seem to have been to Gory Island, but we take for granted that they understand our story. And again, you won't understand the story unless we come together and share cultural experiences.
Yeah, and yeah, that's an excellent point that you make, and it is so true, because part of that is, again, I've learned of that fact through our coming home symposium. Again, that I was one of the speakers and lecturers for, and part of that maybe systematically, but also that's part of their shame, historical shame, if I may use that term. And I don't have a right to call it shame, but just from my outside looking in, that's part of their historical shame, whereby that's something, you know how it is, even here, some things we just don't talk about as families, right? We know it's there, but we ain't gonna talk about it. And I think that in terms of in Africa, in Ghana, and other places across the continent, that indeed was it, right? Because it's such a scar, it's such a hurtful thing. But yet it is necessary for them to learn it, to know it, and for both of us to talk about it, because that is the preimpetus to healing and understanding. And prayerfully one day, that there is a sense of growing unification, because we have that shared history. One of the most powerful moments, if you don't mind me sharing, of one of our coming home symposiums, again, is to try to bridge the gap between Africans and African Americans, was when one of the speakers, a brother from Africa, was here in Chicago, and he just really just shared. And he shared what you said, and he shared, and I never remembered, it was almost not a dry eye in the room. He said, "We're sorry. We didn't know what we were doing." And it was so powerful, just this whole dialogue. I almost came to tears and I had to speak. I was like, man, I can't be crying. I got to talk. Because it tapped into something that I didn't know it was there, but yet it's something we needed to hear. It was part of that connection, right? Just part of that conversation and connection of shared history and shared experience ancestrally that was moving, right? And I still reflect upon that moment, because that's something we as African Americans ain't never heard. All we know that we was here, we were sold to slavery. That's all we know, right? And to hear this one speaker speak and sort of give that angle about that, it was just so moving. And so yeah, they need to know about what happened there in the motherland during slave trade, but also, even again, as we mentioned earlier, knowing the struggle here, the fight here, and even how can they be a part of that? And I think we as African Americans, what it is, Monica, is that tribalism exists right here. And we as African Americans are tribal in that. We're tribal in the sense that if you don't identify with our experience and our tribe, then you can't relate. You ain't black. You ain't black enough. And so when Africans come, they don't get a card. They don't get a pass card because we share the same pigmentation.
Right.
And if the brothers and sisters from Africa who here in America can identify, right, and sort of, hey, understand the struggle, get involved in the struggle, help in the struggle, all that kind of stuff, then we can see some movement in this, us coming together, right? And but many times, that becomes a barrier. It becomes a barrier because they don't quite get involved in the struggle. And if you can't get involved in our struggle, you can't feel our pain, then you ain't with us. And you know how we do it, right? Okay, you really ain't down with us if you ain't down with the struggle. And that would be a worthy conversation to have, to say, okay, what keeps you, if we have this shared history in many ways, one on the continent, the other half on here in the U.S., what keeps you from feeling our struggle? And I think anyone who doesn't feel our struggle, we feel like they're not part of our solution. And so therefore that hinders us getting together to talk and to dialogue and coming together. Because first, I don't think you feel my experience. You don't understand my history here in this America. And so I think that's a very important point for us to look at.
I agree totally. And one of the things I do try to tell my family and friends often is keep in mind, people don't know who you are until you open your mouth. So you will
Mhm.
be judged just like the rest of the African Americans. Nobody knows who you are until you
Yes.
start talking
Yeah,
and giving your history. So
that's true.
our struggle really is your struggle. If we don't get justice, you won't have justice either. So we do
Exactly.
have to definitely work
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Is there,
Yes. Yes.
girl, I'm
Yes.
not gonna, I know you're busy. I'm not gonna keep you long. I promised them that I would keep my episodes shorter now so that people can start to look at them without hesitation. Is there any last minute nuggets for African Americans or Africans that you can give us as it relates to relationship building, better understanding, or travel?
Well, I would say this is that heal. I would say heal your ignorance. Heal
Mm,
your ignorance. That's our biggest barrier,
I like
right? As Africans and African Americans, our biggest barrier is not white people, contrary to popular belief. You know, our biggest barrier is not white people. Our biggest barrier is not the foreign influence or colonialism. Though those are things that have had a major impact. Our destiny, our world power comes in our healing our ignorance of one another,
Mhm.
right? Healing our ignorance of each other's culture, each other's history and experience, right? And even as the Bible says in Isaiah chapter 1, come now, let us reason together, God says. We need a reasoning together between Africans and African Americans. Let's sit down at the table of brotherhood, right? Let's have a conversation. You know, you can bring me your traditional African dish and I'll bring you some collard greens and some fried catfish, right? You know, and we can share, right? We can sort of share and have dialogue. And I've seen the power of that, right? I've seen the power of that when Africans and African Americans sat across a table of brotherhood and fellowship, right? Whereby, you know, it was enlightening, right? All because over a meal, just having a conversation. And so I say, let's heal our ignorance. That's the best thing. How can we do that? If you can and you're able, go to Africa. Get
Yeah.
on one of your trips, right? Go on one of your tours. Uh,
Mhm.
Learn,
Yeah.
read. I don't even want to, I don't want to sound preachy, but
Mhm.
I think that that's a nugget, amen, in terms of travel, in terms of relationships and understanding one another. Let's read on both sides, right?
Yeah.
My African brothers and sisters, read about our struggle, our history, right? Read about some of those who come before us, you know, who written about it, right, and talked about it. And we too need to read about, you know, African authors and things that really give us a deeper perspective and understanding about Mother Africa, whether it be Ghana, which whom I love, right, Nigeria, Kenya, East Africa, South Africa, whatever, right? Learn the history, not just what we get on the American news,
Right.
because that's going to be limited, it's going to be filtered, and we won't get the truth of Mother Africa and the beauty of Mother Africa. Oh my gosh, anybody in this interview, Africa is beautiful. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful place with beautiful people, and they look just like you and me. Yes, amen.
They do. They sure do. I tell you what, I thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And I love that you said we have to heal our ignorance. We have to heal. You have given multiple things that we can do, and we can do them now. We don't have to wait. This is not a plan and some solutions that you've given us that we have to wait for years to come. This is now. Africa. And so I
Yes.
thank you again. Listen, people, it is just my hope that I can learn from you, you can learn from me. So together we can grow and glow. That is it. Be blessed.